going on, y'all? And thank y'all so much for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale. And as always, man, I cannot do this alone. I have me amigo, my longtime amigo. It's cold weather. We're snuggled up under the blanket together recording this. Kyle Filson.
How's it going, everybody? Sorry, I stuttered over my words. I couldn't believe what you were saying. Yeah, we're both sharing this Snuggie.
That's right.
It's nice and warm. We got a fire here in studio. It's a pleasant evening.
Dude, I love this kind of weather, but I do like it's limited. You know, I'm a seasonal person, even though we don't live in there's a place where there's a lot of seasons or you get them all in 1 week. But look, I'm loving this cold because it seems like it took a while to get here.
I don't mind the cold. I hate the wind.
Oh yeah, for real.
Even in the summer, the wind annoys me.
Yeah,
messes up my disc golf. It messes up my kite flying.
Doesn't mess up your hair.
Well, that's true. I don't have any hair, so I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, man, I'm doing good. Getting back in the swing of things. It always takes a little bit of time after you get back from vacation. I don't know why, to get back into the routine of things. And then again, the freaking pesky COVID. It's got the schools shut down again, so the kids are at home. I think they're going to go back next week, but it's really kind of up in the air. So again, when the kids are at home, I have to find excuses to get out of the house so I can work and keep my sanity. And
so when I had the COVID, right? Like back in, you know, like we talked about, y'all remember all this stuff when me and my family had it and all that. And I didn't know a lot of people that had it. You know, it was kind of hit or miss. Now it's to the point that like, I don't know anybody that hasn't had it. Like, I know a ton of people that have had it now, like legitly tested positive. My daughter-in-law has had it twice.
Right. And then there's people that say that you can't get it twice. I don't think
we know, right?
That's what I think.
Just like, we don't know. We're just going with it.
Yeah, but you're right. I think it's passed through, which is, you know, what's going to happen with the pandemic.
Yeah.
You can't escape it unless you want to live on Mars or something.
But hey, look, other than that, I'm feeling great. We're all feeling healthy. You're doing good, right?
Doing good.
Your foot's good.
My foot's good. I'm out of the boot.
Everything's good.
I didn't hurt myself snowboarding on it, so I'm good to go for now.
Hey, perfect. That's all we can ask for, man.
That's right.
Is just plowing along and talking about creepy, crazy stuff. And I'm going to jump into it because I have to share this.
Okay.
This comes from up near Bendon, Michigan. Again, for all my Michiganites out there, I've got my good buddy Tony, which y'all will hopefully be seeing some stuff that we've done together, what I did during the hunting trip. Get this finished and I can send to you.
Big shout out, Big Tony.
Big Tony, I believe, is from Traverse City, Michigan, and that's why I wanted to talk about this and let him know about this. This is an official in a local government filed this report, okay?
Yeah.
And it says that they asked to remain anonymous. So I had hollered at Lon. Me and Lon's been going back and forth. And then I saw that he had this, and I'm going to message him and be like, man, he's going to get a kick. So anyway, listen to this. It says the situation started around midnight on a Saturday night in 2007 when the witness was coming home from a friend's house in Benzonia, Michigan, and taking the back way home to Traverse City. He stated that while traveling on Cinder Road, several miles outside of the town of Bendon, Michigan, he observed a pair of eyes reflecting off his headlights just ahead of him. Thinking it was probably a deer along the side of the road, he began to slow down. And as he got closer, however, he stated that the object was much larger and much darker than a deer.
Wow.
Yeah, he said that by the time he got there, he had slowed around 30 miles per hour and was at the point several hundred feet from the creature, which still hadn't moved. Goes on to say as he approached further, he stated that the only way he could describe this creature was being similar to a very large dark wolf. However, he observed that this thing wasn't on four legs, but was upright, his back two legs standing near a road-killed deer. And he estimated that the creature stood a little over 6 foot tall and had very dark fur. He also stated that by now he was going slow enough to bring his truck to a stop in the road and observe the creature, which had not moved yet and was still staring at him. I wouldn't have come to a stop with it staring at me. He says he mentioned that for a brief second he believed that the object was a giant stuffed animal. I'm going to stop right there. I could fully believe that.
Yeah, sure.
I could fully believe somebody kind of building something like that and just putting it out in the yard or putting it on the side of the road. You and I had talked about it at one time at our deer lease about building a big, like an 8 foot tall Bigfoot and just leaving it in the brush. Not a cutout, but and just see what it looks like.
There's a house, the guy, it's like some farmer has acreage.
Is it in New Orleans?
No, this, No, good one. Good one. This is up by like Salina, McKinney area.
I got you.
And there's a tree line where it's all like spruce trees or something he's got planted. And he has what looks like a stuffed Bigfoot walking.
That dude's awesome.
And I'm sure he puts it there when people drive and will take a double take. But you can, when you look at it for a few minutes, you can tell it's fake. But I'm like, it's a good idea.
It still would be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm going to talk about more about, I got something else to say after that. So listen, so he had brought up it being stuffed, right? Mm-hmm. And he said he believed that the object was a giant stuffed animal put there for some kind of prank due to the fact that he had never seen anything like this in his life, and that he was able to drive up on it as close as he was without having it moving at all. Now, before he could finish that thought, he goes on to say that the creature then dropped to all four legs and sprinted across the road, the road, and disappeared into the woods on the other side of the roadway. He says that he was frozen in his seat for a minute, wondering just what the hell had just happened.
Right.
He said whatever that was, it was for real. And as perplexed as he was that night over what he had seen, he was deathly afraid to go wandering into woods to investigate any further. Hey, good on him. It says here, the witness was asked if the animal had made any sounds before it disappeared. He said that he did not hear it make any noise. He was also asked if it could have been a bear, and he stated, absolutely not. He said he is a bear hunter, and he regularly hunts in the Upper Peninsula, so he obviously knows what bear look like up close. So I found that extremely interesting. Here we are again, back in Michigan, right? Now we're back on the Dogman, and this thing didn't freeze or didn't move. It was frozen. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Do you think it sensed or it knew or saw the lights? And it's one of those ones, you know how some animals just freeze, right? Just,
yep.
I'll tell this story, which is kind of funny. I guess you could say funny. I have seen large white-tailed deer, big bucks, video footage of them, seen a lot of stuff like this to where, well, we experienced one like that when we were on this hunt. We drove by one in a milo field. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Nice buck, big whitetail. And when I say drove by one, we were 30, 35 foot from him. He was sitting off the road in uncut milo, and he never got up. He just kind of tucked his head. Those older animals they understand that if they think they're hidden, right, and they're not moving, more than likely you're not going to see it. You think about the stuff you see going down the road. It's either out in the open or it's moving. Because that's how your eye distinguishes at that speed, at that distance, and all this stuff. So that tells me right there, it seems to have intelligence. It has dealt with this before, and then it knew when to wig out, and it also knew when to get a free meal.
Right. Yeah.
Again, these are all traits of a flesh and blood creature.
I know. But look, yet, how can there be werewolves walking around? Exactly.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm beyond. The Dogman thing is still the craziest stuff in the world to me. I cannot wrap my head around. A buddy of mine, Clayton, sent me a video of a guy had made a suit. Looked like he used sheetrocker still. It's like your old man did when he made it. And he made a Dogman, except he's like 12 foot tall.
Right.
Dogman. And I mean a badass cosplay outfit. What I thought of was, and this is what I had responded to Clayton with, is I'm like, hey man, could you imagine if he didn't overblow it? If he didn't overshoot the landing and make it 12 foot, just make it 7.
Yeah.
So it's close, because what's the eeriness? When certain things get so big, you have too much information, right? You're like, holy Lord, this thing is huge. Whereas to me, the most unnerving is if it's just outside of the normal range. And for the human eye, 7 to 8 foot would be a normal range. My little cousin, Jacob, the one that plays football, he's 6'10", 6'8", 6'8". He's 6'8".
Jeez.
Weighs 320.
Yeah.
And he's huge, but it's not so disproportional. And well, his little brother, I think, just won a national title. Or they won it last year. Maybe they didn't win it this year. His little brother is on the cheer team at OU.
I got you.
And he's a massive individual too. He's like 6'4", 6'5", and he's bigger, like thicker, muscular. John's a beast. Like, John's one of those dudes who was born without a neck. Like, I mean, yeah. And so I see those big guys, and I always think if you just took him and you made him a foot taller, it's just outside of the norm. Proportionally, it changes the way you feel about everything because it's close enough to be right, but it's just not right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Instead of it blowing it out of proportion. So I would like to try to make a suit, or for you and I to do a little experiment like that to see, if we could come up with a Dogman outfit.
I'm not wearing it. No, you'll get shot.
No, you wear it on Halloween. You don't go out in it. You kidding?
Yeah.
This is just for us to Halloween it up. You'll be a Bigfoot. I'll be a Dogman or something. That's what we should do. We'll cosplay it up.
That would be cool.
We'll try it anyway.
Check this out. This comes from a listener. It says, I'm messaging you guys about an experience I had at Buchanan Cabins in Concan, Texas, which is about an hour west of San Antonio, back in 2012. I rented a cabin for a few days with a group of 8 other friends, all of us in our mid to late 20s. The cabin was a very short walk from the Frio River, maybe minutes away. We drank, ate, sat around campfires, played cards and board games, and swam. Typical summertime river activity. One night, around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., pretty sure it was around 3:15, but maybe I'm imagining that part so it wouldn't fit so perfectly, I was woken by the sound of scratching on the wall. It sounded like a branch or an animal. I didn't think anything of it. But a few seconds later, the scratch came back, but this time louder. Imagine the sound of millions of branches touching every square inch of the roof and walls, shaking violently. I was completely surrounded by the scratching sound, like it came from literally every direction. Like some kind of forest spirit was waging war on my temporary domicile. This lasted for several seconds. A minute or so later, I heard someone gently jiggling the doorknob on the entrance to the cabin. All of my friends were inside and asleep. Like a typical horror movie idiot, I went to answer the door and investigate, but my then girlfriend, now wife, begged me not to do it, clearly saving me from some unimaginable fate. I might not be here today if it was not for her. Not long after that, I thought I saw a large black figure entering through the patio doors, which were sliding glass doors. A friend was sleeping out there but didn't notice anything. I might have imagined the figure, but I was convinced enough to grab whatever was next to me, turned out to be a hairbrush, and threw it at the figure while yelling, "Get out!" That woke everyone up and gave them a laugh when they realized what I threw. Absolutely certain that I heard the scratching sounds and the doorknob turning. The memory of the scratching gives me goosebumps as I type this. My then girlfriend, now wife, heard it too and gave the same description. Of course, everyone thinks I imagined it, even though my wife and I were both woken by it and remember it vividly. But you know how that story goes. I'm, however, the only one who saw the black figure, which could have easily been a hallucination, given that I was already on edge. I emailed Buchanan Cabins, asking if anyone else had similar stories, but I never heard anything back. Such a shame, as I'd love to know if there's more to the story than what little bit I experienced. And I've never heard of an encounter like this on your podcast or any other. Peace, y'all. Go Stars. Andrew. Andrew, thank you for the cool story. Yeah, I don't know anything about the Buchanan Cabins, but there are quite a few people that have emailed the show where they were renting a cabin or doing an Airbnb or something, and something strange happened to them. And when they emailed the owner was like, yeah, we really don't, tell people that because not everybody has these experiences. But that would be interesting. Maybe the silence that you never received anything back is an indication that they know and they don't want to promote that because no one's going to want to rent the cabin.
True story.
But I say if I was the owner of a cabin, I would promote it because you get all these people in ghost hunting groups that want to come stay at your cabin specifically to try to capture something.
Why not?
There's that one house on the hill in Mineral Wells. That sucker's like $500 a night to stay. Mm-hmm. And a man that my wife used to work for, I'm not going to say exactly what he does, but his wife and a bunch of her friends actually stayed there.
And?
I don't think they really heard anything.
Yeah.
But that is, I will
But that's
say
a
this.
good gig.
I will,
You know what I'm
I will
saying?
say
It
this.
really is a good gig if you get it going your way.
She's not like a trusted ghost hunter, right? Like, so I think it was like her and some friends wanted to have something, but they probably ended up playing Keno, drinking some wine.
They got wine locked and didn't go look for nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are YouTube. You can go on YouTube and look for like, I think it's called the House on Haunted, not Haunted, the House on the Hill in Mineral Wells, Texas. If you look that up, there's lots of ghost hunters that have been and stayed at that particular house. It's right next to the hotel there.
By the Baker?
Yeah.
It's right up behind it, I think.
Have you seen the pictures of the renovations they've been doing in that thing?
I have not.
Oh, man, they look good.
Is it going to be awesome?
I mean, they're only like halfway through, but it looks pretty cool.
I'm so glad they're doing it.
Do you know I think Curly of the Three Stooges actually stayed there, back in the day?
Back in the day, there was a lot of people. Dude, it's a neat, when it gets good, we'll have to go over there and check it all out. Have you ever heard of the Rio Frio Fest? I remember
Yeah.
Okay, that's where they have it. It's down there. It's in Uvalde County, which is where it's at, which is cool. For those of you that are the uninitiated in Texas country music scene, we legitly have like our very own music scene in this entire state, and it branches out to other states. But we have big music festivals down here. That's what's known as Texas country. And just like we talked about,
Red Dirt music, rockabilly stuff.
It's funny you bring it up. Stoney LaRue was in the last one. The last one was in 2020. Stoney LaRue was there. Shane Smith and the Saints. Parker McCullum, the Limestone Kid. William Clark Green was down there. Mike Ryan. There was a whole bunch of them were down there. It'd be fun. And you go float the river and do all that. So maybe they'll bring it back. That'll be cool. But yeah, that's a fun part of Texas right down there. And it's beautiful. So anything that would happen along that river that I would believe any of it.
Sure.
I mean, that's a rough part of the world back in the day. So the town itself only has like 250 people.
Yeah.
It's not a very big area. It's like Lukenbach. If you've never really been to Lukenbach and you've heard all that stuff, we used to go as a kid. Literally, it was 2 barns. That's it, man. So, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things.
Right. Well, let's take a break, and then when we get back from the break, I'm going to be talking about some more guardian angels, the third man factor, angels among us, those kind of stories. Stick with us, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Have you ever missed a death by an inch? Have you ever been in a really sticky situation? A hostile relationship, perhaps? A fight or altercation? Or really ill or sick? Do you believe you had a little help? A disembodied voice in the back of your head telling you what to do, comforting you with words of praise or encouragement, guiding you out of the darkness when all seems lost. If so, you may be one of the many people with a guardian angel story. People from all over the world have reported encounters with mysterious beings. These appear to bring important messages or lend much-needed assistance, then vanish without a trace. Could they be angels, or even guardian angels, sometimes referred to as the third man factor? Some of the most fascinating and uplifting stories of the unexplained are those that people perceive as being miraculous in nature. Sometimes they take the form of answered prayers, or interpreted as the actions of a guardian angel. These remarkable events and encounters lend comfort, strengthen faith, and even save lives. They almost always seem to happen when they are needed most. Are they literally from heaven? Or are they the result of the interaction of our consciousness with a profoundly mysterious universe? However you view them, these real-life experiences are worth our attention. Let's begin. It was a Sunday afternoon in March in Arizona. The hot Tucson sun beat down on a brilliant yellow sports car. Jane Pottle had just driven her husband to work and now was passing down a broad boulevard on her way home. In an instant, she was unconscious. She saw swirling stars and went limp. She had no idea, quite literally, what hit her. Later, she learned that a large Cadillac, driven by an 80-year-old man, had shot out from a side street on her right, with trees obscuring its movement until the last moment. It smashed into her sports car, throwing it back 20 feet and virtually destroying its front end. Jane had a vivid sense of fighting to come to. It took several minutes for her to regain some awareness of her surroundings, but even then, she could not focus her vision, except on the bright sunshine that poured into the shattered automobile. Her head had cracked the windshield. Her forehead had split open, and blood was pouring from the injury. Her chest had hit the steering wheel hard, but at the time, she had no idea what was happening to her. She said, "I remember thinking, why is it so hard to breathe? Why can't I move?" I then realized I was gravely hurt. I was in a car accident, but I was too weak to help myself. I started to panic, thinking I was going to die. Jane then started praying for help. Her breathing became more and more rapid and more labored. She knew she was in great danger. She said, "That's when I suddenly felt a warm, soft hand holding mine. I was not startled. I was happy and relieved that someone was there. I could not see her, but I thought, gee, someone has sat in the passenger seat to help me. Maybe a passerby." Her eyes could not focus on the person, but she knew it was a woman and could feel her hand and hear her calm, soothing voice. It seemed almost like a whisper in her ear, and indeed, inside her head. While the soft hands clasped onto hers, the woman's voice spoke with extreme clarity. "Calm down. Breathe very slowly. Don't worry. Help is on the way." It was more than simple advice. It was a command. The voice repeated, "Calm down. Breathe very slowly," until Jane cast off her panic and practiced breathing slowly, just as the voice advised. She said, "I had the feeling I only had a minute or two to live. I assumed she was a real, tangible person in authority who knew exactly what to do. Yes, I feel the woman was there to ensure my survival. I would have died without her help." Jane gradually became aware of many other voices around the car, but she could not understand what they were saying. She just practiced breathing extremely slowly, as the woman suggested. The woman, Jane thought she looked like a nun, assured her that she had no reason to panic and told Jane that she would not leave her side. Jane felt relieved and decided to just concentrate on surviving. The accident occurred just around the corner from a hospital, directly in front of a church. She had no concept of how much time had passed, though it seemed like a good while before paramedics arrived. Her legs were pinned in the wreckage, so firefighters had to pry open the door to free her, which took another 10 minutes. When they succeeded, Jane realized her helper had left. She said the nun's hand had disappeared at the same time the paramedics grabbed me. She later remembered, "I just assumed she made way for them. She was right there, right up until the last second. It had seemed to me that she dissipated, but I thought she was just there to keep me company until they arrived. I didn't think it was strange that she had left. I did, however, think it strange at the time that she seemed to have just disappeared into thin air, and none of the other paramedics were speaking to her as they entered the car. But I had other things on my mind, so I didn't dwell on it." The paramedics worked quickly to assess her condition. They gave her an injection and asked her whom they should contact. She said her husband's phone number was in her purse. She was lifted onto a gurney and then into an ambulance before being conveyed to the hospital. The paramedics were talking loudly to her all the way, ensuring that she did not slip into unconsciousness, and Jane was now more alert and coherent. The last thing she remembered before entering surgery was the sound of the gurney going clickety-clack as the medical personnel hurried it down one of the hospital hallways. Her surgery lasted 5 hours, from 3 o'clock to 8 in the evening. She was clinically dead for 2 minutes. At 7:30 p.m., soon she lapsed into a coma and remained in that state for a month, hooked up to life support. Jane had some level of awareness during the coma, however. She noticed the nurses' shift changes and registered when doctors made their rounds. She also felt as if a woman visited her each day during this period and put a red rose on her night table. She could smell the strong, sweet fragrance of a single rose as the aroma filled the room. To this day, red roses are her favorite flower. Later, when she emerged from the coma, she asked the nurses about the visitor, and they insisted there was no woman visitor. No one other than her husband and her parents were allowed to see her in the intensive care unit. She also asked about the woman in her car, the woman who she feels saved her life. The nurses tracked down the head paramedic at the accident scene, who assured her no one else was in the car when they arrived, and confirmed that, in fact, no one would have been able to enter the car through either one of the doors. The small vehicle had crumpled up like an accordion in the collision. It took the jaws of life to open the driver's side door just to get her out. Jane had no memory of the equipment or the noise it made to retrieve her. She said, "I guess I tuned it all out and just focused on my breathing. If I had continued to panic during that time, I would have died. My ribs were broken and I had a punctured lung, which was bleeding. My nose was ripped off, but still attached and hanging to one side, and my insides were slowly filling with blood. Indeed, if I had continued to panic, the blood would have filled my lungs and airways, and I would have drowned." It was a long and difficult recovery for Jane. Even after she emerged from the coma, she had to learn how to breathe properly, eat, and walk again. Both her arms and legs remained in traction for 3 months. After she was released from the hospital, she remained on crutches for another 6 months. The doctors say it was a miracle that I even survived. I was told by the doctors that they did not know how I lived through such an ordeal, but I knew. Jane wanted to live, and she received help that made her survival possible. Initially, Jane was uncertain what had happened to her, stating, "Whether she was an angel who had materialized to help, or a human being, I really don't know." Later, however, conviction replaced uncertainty. She said, "I firmly believe the woman was an angel who manifested in physical form to help me. She told me, I don't know if you can really create physical beings that you can touch, feel, and hear just by thinking it. Besides, I had just prayed for help, and it was answered immediately." Jane said she was in no position to have helped herself. She was panicking and struggling to breathe and didn't really know what was wrong with her. She said, "I had no true understanding of the situation to give the proper solution. I definitely would have died. I thought I was going to die without understanding quite why, and I panicked. I'm sure I did not create the events that unfolded." Wow. This is like so many other stories I've heard and read about in the past. These people are in a terrible accident or something like that, and this mysterious person or voice or being appears and helps them through the situation. I like stories like this. Very, very interesting. Moving on. Starting when he was 23 years old, Arthur Agnew began drinking heavily. It started as a social activity. He would go with friends to the pub in his hometown and drink and drink and drink. For the first 5 years, he was able to balance the heavy drinking with the rest of his life, at least to a point. He and his wife had children and built a family, and Arthur had steady work as a security guard. Soon, however, he started to drink on the job and was heading down the path to full-blown alcoholism. As Arthur put it, "You don't know where the line is, and you cross over it. It's other people who know you have crossed it. It was way out of control." The drinking eventually escalated, after he and his young family relocated to Livingston, a city outside of Edinburgh. He tended to stop visiting the pub and just stayed home and drank. It was, he said, a cheaper alternative. He would have 6 beers in the morning just to start his day, and continue drinking throughout, sometimes adding shots into the mix. All semblance of a normal home life was lost. Arthur couldn't hold down a job, and they survived on welfare. His health was also suffering. He had an enlarged liver, as well as other problems associated with alcoholism. His first priority was not his family. It wasn't his health, or his jobs, paying the bills, or anything else. It was the alcohol. His young boys were being badly affected. They didn't want to go to school, and social workers intervened. After a series of meetings with Arthur, he was told that unless he mended his ways, the children would be taken into care. But even that threat was not enough to make him stop. The kids were not the priority, he said. This disease of alcoholism made itself number one in my life. Nothing else mattered. The boys were eventually seized, and yet that dramatic loss failed to alter his course. As he later stated, "My attitude was, this gave me more time to drink. It gave me more money to drink as well." He suffered blackouts. Sometimes he would be injured while inebriated and would end up at the hospital. Other times, he would find himself in police custody as a result of being drunk and disorderly, or being a nuisance. In court, a judge scolded him. "You know what your problem is, Mr. Agnew? You have to stop drinking." But judges were not the only ones who told him to stop drinking. So did his parents, social workers, doctors, and friends. He even spoke to a priest. Everyone who was witness to the slow-motion wreck that was his life delivered the same message. They tried to explain to me this was going to kill me. They asked me to quit for my own sake, for the children, for the family. But I did not, said Arthur. I had spoken to all these professionals, and none of them could help me. I was deaf to what they were saying. Then the social workers sought to remove the children permanently and to find adoptive family for them. The boys were very young, and they had never experienced a normal upbringing on account of all the drinking. Arthur was in no position to raise these children. It was July 1991, and Arthur was sitting home alone. The television was off. He had finished 1 can of beer and was about 3/4 of the way through a second. He was staring out the front window at a street lamp. Then he suddenly felt a presence in the house with him, as if there was another person there with him, and he heard a voice. It was a male voice, and it spoke very clearly and with great authority, using a no-nonsense tone. The presence said to him, "If you take another drink, you won't see out the year." The voice came over his shoulder, but Arthur didn't jump. He wasn't frightened. He did not turn around. He just turned his eyes to the floor. There was nothing else. The presence had left, and he felt that he was alone once again. Its message was something he had been told many times before, but he said, this was different. I knew this was what it was. Everything made sense at that moment. I was really just a dead man walking. I was sick of being sick. I didn't finish that can of beer. Instead, he poured it down the toilet. Within 2 weeks, he stopped using the Valium, the dry alcohol he was also taking. Valium was actually part of the treatment to help him through his initial withdrawal from alcohol. However, it also quickly became an addiction. As he abused the tranquilizers as a substitute for alcohol, that's when he ran out of money. One day, however, he just forgot to take one of the pills, and nothing happened. He had no reaction. So he skipped another one, then stopped entirely. He explained, gesturing over his shoulder, I put it down to the guy here, the presence, as well. Was it God or an angel? Or was it my own soul crying out? Did it come from deep, deep within me? I have no idea. The presence was emphatic, however, and its message was a command, one he felt he must obey. Arthur never doubted it, stating, It was almost as if someone, this voice, knew me intimately. I felt a release, and a thought crossed my mind. Now I can finally go forward. This intervention saved his life. He began attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, which helped, but when he shared his own story, he held back about the presence. He later said, "I was afraid it would be attributed to an alcoholic hallucination. I did not want to share it with anyone. It was a very, very powerful and private moment." He said of his ability to break the cycle of alcoholism, "It was a shock to me, to social workers, to everyone." Arthur was able to regain custody of his children and reunite his family. He bought a cab and began rebuilding his career. He took up skydiving and has made 600 jumps. In 2007, he traveled in an MiG aircraft to the edge of space, 82,000 feet. He has not touched alcohol or Valium again in over 2 decades. After his encounter with the presence, he has, in short, never looked back. Again, see, this isn't an accident. This is someone who's hit rock bottom, and this voice comes to them and tells them, like, what are you doing, man? Get your life together. You got to stop. And it's so profound to the person that experiences that he did. He changed his life. And that's why on the show, me and Cam always talk about whether somebody truly saw something, had an experience, or it was a hallucination. Either way, the experience changed them. So in the end, does it really matter if it was a real angel that talked to him or it was his own self-conscious? Either way, his life was changed. Very interesting. Check this one out. This next one Cam's going to love. The sun hung slowly over Solido Beach in New South Wales, with the scorching heat dancing on the bluff sand. Derwin Kegg had been surfing for an hour and a half with a couple of friends and was waiting 200 meters offshore for the next big wave. Suddenly, a pod of dolphins streaked past them. These were experienced surfers who knew that the presence of a shark would often agitate dolphins. 2 of Derwin's friends were then able to catch a wave that carried them safely toward shore. But Derwin found himself alone on the deep blue water, counting the seconds until he assumed he would also ride a wave into the shallower water. That's when he noticed a huge dark shape in the water. It appeared still at first, so he thought for a moment it might be a large clump of seaweed, but then it began to move towards him, slowly. He felt the bottom of his stomach drop out as the realization sank in that this was a great white shark. He was too far from land, and the enormous predator was closing in on him. Now, when confronted with great danger, we instinctively do a mental calculation. Is it possible to get out of this? What are the odds? He did the very same, concluding that he had absolutely no chance of surviving. Derwin turned his surfboard to face the shore. If he was going to have one last look at anything, it was going to be his friends and the land in the distance. He made one paddling stroke, lurching forward slightly. The shark swam beneath his board, arcing around at lightning speed so that it was now behind him, and then came directly at him, knocking him off his surfboard and into the water. Now another surfer, Michael Lawrence, was only 6 meters closer to shore when he heard him scream, and he said, "At first, I thought he was joking. Then I heard a scream of terror. I turned to see a massive fin and Derwin thrashing in the water. Derwin punched, kicked, pushed. He did everything he could to ward off this shark, and he succeeded temporarily. Clambering back onto his board, he began paddling frantically, screaming more warnings to those on the water. He looked back and saw the shark again, swimming straight for him, moving like a big black fat torpedo. The creature breached 2 meters away. It was massive, at least 3 times his own width. Derwin then threw himself off his surfboard and tried to use it as a shield. The shark dragged the surfer some distance, and Derwin somehow found himself briefly on its back before the shark again dove. Derwin resumed paddling, but his arms and neck were stiff, and he struggled to put any distance between himself and his attacker. At one point, the shark breached right beside him, so close he was able to look it in the eye, and he felt as if he could see its utter ruthlessness. It then went under and made another turn, readying to resume its attack. At that point, Derwin gave up. He felt he had no strength left to fight. He was going to eat me this time for sure, Derwin said. I resigned myself to the fact that I was already dead. Then, suddenly, everything seemed to change. Time seemed to be suspended. Derwin became aware of the presence of another being with him and felt it was much stronger than one person. His panic and fear seemed to wash away, and he was left with a sense of peace and euphoria. He said, I had no fear whatsoever. I was completely conscious of what was going on, but at the same time, I felt as if I didn't exist. A strong voice urged him to get as close to shore as he could, and he resumed paddling, now stronger than ever. The shark came again, up behind Darwin, but this time it remained about a meter away. He said, I had no fear whatsoever, and calmly but determinedly paddled. The great white shark followed for at least 30 meters, then veered off. Derwin has since tried to understand what happened, and some people have told him that reaching that point of fearlessness was the key to his survival. He believes his lack of fear caused the shark to break off the tack. He feels that he had encountered a spiritual being, an angel, as he puts it that day. He said, when I got to that moment, calm and peace and complete acceptance of what was to come. It was totally a divine intervention. Now, Derwin credits the angel with saving his life. I shouldn't be here, he reflected. For the simple reason that he had experienced it, nothing anyone could ever say or do could dissuade Derwin Kegg of the idea that an angel or some other spiritual being had intervened. Again, is it's, fight or flight? Is there some internal mechanism deep within us tells us what to do at that moment? Or is it a guardian angel? Is it one of your loved ones that's passed on, looking in on you, giving you words of encouragement, telling you to press on? I don't know, but I definitely like the idea of it. I've got one more for you. What if your guardian angel took the form of an animal? Is that even possible? Perhaps it is. A man named Mike Stevenson thinks so, and I do too. Mike Stevenson dropped to his knees in the dark. He searched beneath the deepening, drifting snow for the trough of a snowshoe track, marking his passage from camp earlier that day. He detected no trace. The storm blocked every glint of starlight. The night was blacker than a raven's eye. Stevenson had moved cautiously in the direction he believed would take him back to his winter camp. He held his arms straight out in front to avoid being struck in the face or his eyes by tree limbs. He felt a penetrating chill. Growing fatigue began to signal hypothermia's seductive pull. Fear started to rise. He was lost. For the second winter in a row, Stevenson had stayed behind alone in the Bob Marshall wilderness after fellow members of the outfitter's crew had readied mules and horses and set out for home before the big snows stranded them in the backcountry. Stevenson, a Montana native and son of a Forest Service ranger, was 20 years old that December. From his base camp, he traveled to set traps for pine marten, beaver, and other fur-bearing animals. He established 3 spike camps, about a snowshoe's day apart, to provide refuge when checking these traps. The wilderness solitude suited him. He said, I loved being there. I wasn't afraid of the silence. That was what I was looking for. Stevenson is now 64 years old. After graduating in 1975 from Hellgate High School, Stevenson felt no attraction to higher education. He said, I always had a passion to get out into the woods. I wanted to get into the wildest country I could. And so he did. Earlier that fall, While the other outfitter clients hunted elk, bear, and deer in the bobs, Stevenson and other packers made camp in the Big Salmon Creek drainage, about 20 miles from the trailhead. The pay was low and the work demanding, but Stevenson was precisely where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. The fall camp included a wall tent set up to shelter hay and grain for the horses and mules. The hay tent's ridgepole was attached to a tall snag. The hay and grain attracted mice. One day, Stevenson told the Montana Standard, a local newspaper, that this owl showed up at camp. The owl decided to set up camp right at our camp because the mice hunting was good. The owl would sit there on top and snag and watch for a mouse. This owl was pretty vocal. The thing would hoot all night. At the time, Stephen could not identify the owl's species. He later determined it was a barred owl by identifying its hoot. When the packers, guides, and stock departed in November, so did the feed, and so did the owl. The outfitter agreed to leave behind for Stevenson's use this wall tent that stored the feed. The day the snowstorm hit, Stevenson had snowshoed 3 or 4 miles down to Big Salmon Lake to check some beaver traps. He discovered that he had trapped 2 beavers, one large and one smaller. One beaver had wrapped the trap wire around a submerged log. Stevenson realized the dead animal's retrieval would require a wintry skinny dip. He said, "I built a big bonfire before I went in. It was no big deal just to build a fire and jump into the lake." Stevenson decided to keep the beaver carcasses as well as the pelts to use the animal's meat to bait other traps. He put the smaller beaver in his pack and dragged the larger animal behind him with a rope. He said it was a long wait going back. It got to be late one day, and I headed back to camp. The storm had dropped over a foot of fresh snow. About a half mile to a quarter mile from camp, it got too dark to see. That's when the snow really started blowing. I still wasn't worried at this point. I knew I was close to camp. I dug down in my pack for my flashlight, but wouldn't you know it, it wasn't working. It was only my second winter back there, and I was still a rookie. I didn't have an extra bulb with me. I kept going and going, but I could not find our camp. I got completely mixed up. I'll admit it, I was completely lost. And it was so discouraging because I knew the camp was so close. I was starting to get cold, and I thought, okay, well, I'll just stop and build a fire. Stevenson decided the fire could take him into the dawn, when the morning light would reveal the way to his camp. From his backpack, he removed the damp carcass of the smaller beaver and reached down for the fire-starting materials he used earlier that day to build the bonfire. But now, they were wet, soaked by lake water coming off the beaver carcass. He said, "I wandered around a little more. I knew I had to keep moving to keep my body temperature up. I found a little sapling. I thought, I'm just going to go around and around this trunk as long as I can. But I wasn't moving fast enough to keep my body temperature up. I sat down in the snow and almost went to sleep. But I'd get back up and I'd go around the tree some more. At this point, I started to think I was going to die. I was getting scared. I was shaking and I wanted to go to sleep. I wasn't religious and I didn't know how to pray, but figured this might be a good time to give it a try. I prayed, God, please, if you're real, please just help me. Just before I was going to sleep, I heard an owl hoot. It sounded like the same owl that had been hanging around our hunting camp. I had not heard it or seen it in weeks. Stevenson thought there might be some small chance the owl was hooting from the site of the former hunting camp, now his winter camp. Out of desperation, he decided to follow the sound the best he could. He said the owl would continue to hoot about every 10 minutes. It was my only hope. I knew it was a big risk because of my strength that was almost gone, but I was out of options. He continued to snowshoe with his arms outstretched in the dark, and he said I would stumble from time to time and fall because I was weak, but I just kept pushing. Stevenson sensed the owl was perched above him, and then it quit hooting altogether. When it did start up again, it was from a completely different direction. Stevenson's heart sank. He thought to himself, maybe this owl was simply flying around in the woods hunting. Barred owls, like many owls, are active at night. He faced another decision. Should he continue following the sound of this hooting owl, even though it changed course? Again, he decided to risk it, even though doing so seemed more rooted in desperation than reason. Stevenson plodded through the trees, his arms outstretched, following the intermittent hoots. He said, "I don't know how long it took. All of a sudden, my hands hit the woodpile next to my tent. I could hardly believe it. I got a fire going, and though I started to think to myself, I'm going to make it." The next day, Stevenson decided to retrace his steps to discover how he'd gotten lost. He discovered that the owl's abrupt change in direction had actually saved him from plunging in the dark down a dangerous drop near Big Salmon Creek. He said, The owl took me around it." Today, more than 40 years later, awe and wonder resonate in Stevenson's voice when he describes the events of that night. He said, "At that time in my life when it happened, I knew something had happened. I couldn't explain it. Something mysterious." Years passed. Stephen has family ties back to the Blackfeet Nation. They include cousins who live in Browning. In recent years, he has been invited to Blackfeet ceremonies. He said, "A few years back, I was transferred the right to keep a Blackfeet pipe. Through the pipe, through ceremony and talking with elders, I'm learning a little about the unseen in the natural world around us. I've learned that our Creator will sometimes send us help in unusual ways. That night, it came in the form of a medicine owl." I hope you liked those stories as much as I did. Let's take a break. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. Woo! I hope you liked those stories. Interesting. These people, whether they're in a car wreck or just suffering from some kind of addiction or something, they feel this presence, this voice that tells them what to do, and they make it out. And even the last story where this owl seemingly helped the man get out of this. He was lost in a blizzard, and he literally followed this owl, which led him back to his camp into ultimate safety. Who knows? Very cool. I like those kind of stories. But let's go the opposite of angels and the light.
Oh.
Let's flip it 180 degrees to the dark. A listener named Peter called in with his story. Check this out.
Hi there. So let's call me Peter. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me when I was 17 years old. When I was 17, I was living in the state of Tennessee. I was living in an area called Laverne, and I used to, during those days, be big into the occult, especially into things like Wicca and Celtic paganism, right? I was actually a practitioner of Celtic paganism during those days. And I belonged to a coven that was eclectic. So everybody there like followed different forms of paganism, whether it be Wicca or many other things, right? And we considered ourselves to be like light magic practitioners, practitioners of what is called the right hand path, right? And during a certain night, it was a full moon. We had heard that there was supposedly a coven that practiced left-hand magic or dark magic in the woods of a park called Cambridge Park that was located in Smyrna. And that park has it's like a little small airport for remote control airports. It's got like a landing strip for remote control airports. A lot of people used to go out there during the day and weekend to fly RC airplanes and things like that. And so we went. It was a group of about 8 of us, including my younger brother, who was not a practitioner or of the occult or anything like that. Actually, he was at that time like Baptist or something. But he went with us just because, we were all hanging out together, and we decided that we were going to go confront this dark coven because we had heard that they were doing supposedly they were doing live sacrifices, supposedly, and that sometimes they were even practicing, necromancy. So we wanted to protect our area, our territory per se. And so we go. It was getting close to midnight. We had left. We were living in the trailer park at the time, and that's why we all hung out in my trailer. And we left around 11, and we headed out towards Cambridge Park. And near the track where the landing strip for the RC airplanes, there is I don't know if they still have one, but there used to be a trail that would lead off into the woods. And that night we were very, we were all emboldened. We were like, we're going to go, we're going to go destroy this dark coven. They're not going to, they're not going to raise the dead in our backyard and things like that, we're a bunch of, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, I think the oldest person among us might have been 20. And we had, we rolled up in there in our F-150s, we all had F-150s here at that time because, while we may have been pagans or whatever, we were still kind of redneck, And so we all pull up in there, and we all get out, and we all pull out our ritual equipment. Some had ritual daggers, some had ritual swords, some had staffs. These kind of things. You look at us, we're like a weird fellowship of the ring or something. And, if anybody else would have seen us, they would have thought we were like a bunch of larpers or something. But, we get out there, it's in the middle of the night, almost midnight, and we head out towards this grove that we had found, we had found evidence that someone had been practicing, dark magic. We had found, blood and bones and, animal bones. We didn't find human bones, but we had found animal bones and things like that had been left behind, and feathers, and we found a few skulls, and we were going like, oh yeah, this, when we had discovered it, it was actually one of those members of the coven was looking for a new spot for us to do our monthly rituals and our solstices and things like that. But because what we used to practice was being zoned out to be cut down, that forest area, so they can they were building a new residential area. So we had to find a new place, and I found it, and then we started investigating. We had heard some, just some rumors and in the cult community in that area about this dark coven. So, we decided we were going to get rid of the dark coven, and we were going to consecrate the grove and then use it for our own purpose. And we get there that night expecting to run into this group, but there was no one there, at least that we could see. And this is where it's interesting. My younger brother, as I mentioned before, he wasn't into the occult or anything like that. He didn't believe in it. He was a skeptic. Even though we both had previous experiences from the time we were young. But my brother always chalked it up to, as he got older, he started saying it was his imagination. And so my younger brother, he's sitting there watching us as we're preparing. We decided we're going to go ahead and cleanse the area and consecrate it for ourselves, right? And then we're going to set up boards and all this kind of stuff, right? And what ended up happening was, as we were setting up, we started all feeling like kind of sick to our stomachs, and there was this ominous feeling. And then my brother looks up and he's staring. He's like looking up towards the trees, and he's staring into this one spot, and he's shaking, and we're all, what's wrong? And he kind of slowly shaking points up to that one spot, and we all look. Now, I don't know if it was a mass hysteria or what. I can attest that we weren't high that day. We weren't drinking that day or anything, because we believed in practicing our craft sober. We weren't into doing it with, we all look up. Now, I see two glowing red eyes, or at least two glowing dots, but they looked like they were two glowing red eyes. And when we saw that, somebody said, run. And we ran. My brother I'd never seen him run so fast. He was like meters ahead of us. And we all took off running and we ran to the car. We freaked out because, as I mentioned, we had already been feeling sick. We had sickening presence. It felt like there was a presence around us. And we were trying to cleanse it, but it was so heavy. It was so malignant. And then when we saw those two glowing red dots, it was it. And it wasn't the first time I had seen something like that. I had seen something like that another time, about a year before, when we were living in Georgia. But that'll be for another time. I've been listening to your show for years now. I started listening when I first got end-stage kidney disease. I do dialysis at home now, but I used to do it when I first started doing dialysis in the center. I that's when I first got into podcasts, and that's when I started listening to your podcast, and it has got me through so many sessions and so many times in my life. I really enjoyed it. And, I always wanted to call you guys and let you know, first of all, that, you guys are doing a great job, and thanks for being there for me, at least. And thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed.
And we're back. Thank you, Peter, for that cool story. Man, when you start messing with the occult and witchcraft and stuff like that, I wouldn't have the stones to do something like that. But a cool story nonetheless. If you have a story you'd like to share with the listeners and me and Cam, call that number 888-393-2783. That's 888-393-BRUD. If you want to email the show, you can. expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. And you can follow me and Cam and the show on social media and things like that. Cam, you got anything big planned for your weekend?
No, just still working on stuff, trying to get everything set up so we also have another. We had talked about it before that we have a surprise coming. Now Kyle and I have another surprise that we're doing. So I'm working on the second surprise. So I got to get some stuff done so we can start filming the second surprise.
Yeah. We're going to undertaking. We're going to try something different out.
And then I forgot all the stuff. I've got like 2 or 3 elite shows that I've got recorded up. So we'll have to get all that stuff done. And then I know you've got a couple. So we
just got to get them out. It's, with the holidays and being gone with ski trips and snowboarding and stuff and getting back in the run of things.
So,
we got some back episodes we just got to get released.
But yeah, it's just been busy. And this year I'm going to try to focus more on the show, like more on doing more stuff on YouTube, more stuff like here, just to keep everything going. I'm working, like I said, I'm trying to figure out Photoshop so I can do some cool thumbnails, and I'm trying. Y'all, I'm a dummy. I'm an old man. I'm an old dog learning new tricks, and this is no kind of fun. But I will tell you this, what is kind of fun, we got a little D&D this evening. We get done here. We got to do some more editing, stuff like that. And then later this evening, Kyle and I are rolling dice, and we are pumped for it like children, man.
I am excited to be back because we took a bunch of time off around the New Year and Christmas and then my snowboard trip and stuff. So it's been a while for me.
It's been something else, right?
I think it's been like 3 weeks.
Hey, I played your guy though. I gathered you up some gold. Now you got to go spend it when we get to town.
Right. Well, thanks to our sponsor, HelloFresh. Don't forget, if you want to get 16 free meals and 3 free gifts, just go to hellofresh.com/expanded16. That's expanded16, and use the promo code expanded16, and you'll get the hookup. Till next time, folks, that's all the time we have for this show. Be safe. I'm Kyle. He's Cam.
Peace, y'all.